of simply going through all regulations. We don't cut corners. Been buoyed by the fact that we really bring excellence to all the markets we participate in. And I think that's why our success is actually where it is. And so thank you guys. I will take any questions. Like I said, I'm very happy to discuss more about CNI. And thank you so much, KPLC, for this opportunity.
Thank you, Albert. I'm cognizant of time, but I wanted to do a quick set of questions with the panelists before opening it up to the floor. The first question is for Juliana. I think you, in terms of showing the general profile of Enel, I think one area perhaps we didn't have the time for you to do a deep dive into is talking about some of the partnerships, the futuristic partnerships that you already have that are deploying things like green fuels. Maybe if you could talk to a couple of those and maybe give us some thoughts on what they could mean in the Kenyan context.
Thanks, Eric, for that question. Yeah, you're right. So we didn't get a chance to actually delve a bit deeper into what Enel is doing from a collaboration standpoint in terms of redefining the energy transition. So we've talked a lot about decarbonization. I'll start with that and then also move into the e-fuels because there's a connect there. So Enel is really committed to decarbonization efforts. And we have partnered with some really interesting customers in regions like actually have those data centers here in Kenya, just because of the numbers that we're seeing in terms of deployment of renewable energy into the grid. Then another interesting thing, and also to some of what Thomas was talking about, Enel has also embarked on a green hydrogen initiative in Chile. We do have operations in Latin America, and we've partnered with a global e-fuel entity called HIF. It's High Innovative Fuels. So we partnered with them to actually launch a pilot project in Chile for green hydrogen. As we try and develop the capabilities, as we try and figure out what are the unit economics of this type of technology, and then how can we scale thereafter. So there's really been a commitment of around $16 million. It may sound small, but that's the largest that's been in Chile so far, at least from a specific fund that's looking to scale this type of technology. So what does that mean for Kenya when it comes to green hydrogen as a demand point? I think for us, one, I'd like to reiterate that we're here, and we're here for the long term. I think what's important for us to understand is there needs to be that enabling environment. So there needs to be that commitment to industrial policies that will help companies like Enel and NFFI actually bring these technologies even faster in the Kenyan context. Another very interesting partnership is actually one that we are working with SpaceX and Starlink of Elon Musk's company, and just to the point of digitalization of our assets. So obviously, renewable energy assets, be it solar or wind, sometimes are in very remote locations. So we have partnered with Starlink to use their connectivity of their low Earth orbit satellites to basically enhance our digitalization efforts and actually leverage on capabilities of Internet of Things, edge computing, and just to leverage that connectivity and enhance things like predictive maintenance that we have. Yeah, so those are some of the partnerships that are there. I think overall, in the Kenyan context, the people who are doing this work are already here, we're already interested. So it's more of when do we start and how quick can we get there.
Thanks, Juliana. So what's the scale of the Chilean project? How big is it envisioned?
So it's not that large. Right now I think it's at 15 megawatt for renewable. I'd have to check the size of the electrolyzer, but it's quite small given the funding that we have. Yeah.
Thanks. On to Tomas. I think you started by showing us some data around quantifying the ambition, the green hydrogen ambition that FFI has. Now, perhaps this is a question in two levels. One, can we translate that into what the renewable energy requirement then is on an annual basis to be able to meet that? And two, perhaps some thoughts about how, because it's starting to, this movement is starting to draw parallels with where we were with, the oil industry, oil and gas industry in the mid-20th century, where basically you had a period where it was almost like a land grab happening globally. What's your perspective on that, and what does it mean in particular for emerging market economies that have a significant renewable energy resource?
Okay, in terms of the scale of energy needed, obviously, as you've seen, 15 million tons of hydrogen per year is a lot of hydrogen. So we're talking large scale. So we're talking numbers on hundreds of gigawatts. 300 gigawatts is something, for example, that we have identified here in Africa has a potential. Obviously, this is not going to happen tomorrow, but there are a few countries that not only have very good renewable energy potential, but have other conditions that means they can be positioned in the forefront of this energy transition. And Kenya is one of them. Kenya has good energy resources. Like I said, it's got infrastructure that's already existent. It just needs that green industry ignite. So it needs that industry to come at risk and take some risks and really push for the new sector. And we believe Fortescue Future Industries could be that industries not only specific to Kenya, but in emerging markets, as you mentioned, across Africa, but on the southern hemisphere. The map that I showed earlier really demonstrates that the potential for this new generation of fuels could be on the southern hemisphere. So we will see a lot of countries, for example, in Europe, will take the consumptions, but they are limited in space and in ability to produce some of these energies. Whilst in some emerging markets, like in Africa or South America, the space is there, the conditions are there. Obviously, we still have a lot to do. We need to get the regulations in place, the approvals pathways done. But I see a massive opportunity for the southern hemisphere to have some geopolitical influence on the new generations of fuels.
So just a follow-up question. So for the 15 million tons a year, what does that translate into the renewable energy capacity that you require to do that?
I don't have the number in terms of how many gigawatts, but like I said, it's hundreds of gigawatts. So it is a big number. It's high numbers, but you only will manage to bring the cost of hydrogen, the price of hydrogen to be competitive with fossil fuels if you scale. You need economics of scale. So that's why all these countries and big players are looking at big projects to be able to get that scale, to bring the price down, so you can compete with fossil fuels.
Albert, I think as you were talking, I was thinking in the back of my mind about the discussion that Tom led around KPLC strategy, which would be a significant move in a whole new direction, embracing the whole kind of global shift towards decarbonization, digitization and smart grids. Now, let's step back for a second and assume that Tom can actually execute quite well on his strategy. And so in 5 years' time, we realize that KPLC that has managed to drive down the cost of power, reliability, and has a modern, intelligent grid. What would that mean for Cross-Boundaries business model? Would you have to start a new business altogether?
I don't think so. I describe Cross-Boundary as an investment firm. We are not completely bound by one particular strategy, but I think the question you're asking is what would happen to captive solar investors or developers. Captive solar does not exclusively supply power to folks that are connected to the grid. You have a lot of industries that operate off-grid, some in very remote areas, and we're talking about some of the mines like I've described here. If you go to places like Mali, where we are actually working on, we're actually a preferred bidder for a 15 megawatt solar and BESS system for a mine that's completely off-grid. These sort of opportunities actually alleviate the investment requirement for the utility to extend the grid. The grid will continue playing a very important role for captive systems. And I believe that even as we speak about distributed energy resources and all that, all those resources actually depend on the grid, because that's a little secret that some captive system investors don't say. If someone puts a solar system on your roof, that's an intermittent source of power. It fluctuates, and the only thing that regulates it, it's either you have a smart inverter or with storage, or it's connected to the grid, so that whenever there's a fluctuation, whether it's a spike or a dip, the grid automatically injects power to keep your load stable. So there's been a symbiotic relationship between our systems, and I think if I'm going to also be prophetic like Dr. Mutua, I think we will continue being competitive simply because centralized generation moves slower than captive systems. So if you are depending on a 20-year PPA, if that's what the utility is depending on, they have a tariff contract. In 2 years, I could get an advantage as a captive system installer and get new technology that's cheaper, and I'll still be able to be more efficient than the utility. So I mean, there's very many arguments you can make against it, but I don't see a huge disruption to the business model.
Interesting. I want to open it up to the floor now. Any questions? And where's the mic that's been going around? I'll start with you, Tom.
Thank you very much, the graveyard shift. This was really graveyard. and that was a very good closing. And my question is to Nganga. Vis-a-vis, because of all these activities on the key players out there in the world towards PV, solar technologies and solutions. Like you said, in the last 10 years, I think, not that I think, I know the prices have gone down significantly. And in my last Expo, a few months ago, one of the things that came out is the cost of generating electricity from solar is going to go to less than, is demonstrable, it's going to be less than a cent. I don't know to what extent, but also the cost of the technology is significantly that for a lot of future customers, it's actually going to be almost their preferred method of generating electricity within their homes. I don't know what your thoughts are to that. And this is simply because, as KPLC, we not mission is to be the energy solutions provider of choice. It probably would make us relook and say, so what business and services that we deliver through ourselves or partners like Cross Boundary? Or do we just wait and see what happens? Your thoughts and probably some insights in terms of the costing and the pricing of the technology. Thank you.
Yeah, I think one of the things I had wanted to discuss on my presentation was what happens, because I think the way you framed the question is, and the way I'm framing it is, what happens to vertically integrated utilities? Dr. Mutua gave us a bit of a hint of what he thinks. By the time he retires, there'll be 3 or 4 KPLCs operating in different regions. That really is I think the unbundling of where, due to competition, KPLC can re-strategize and decide we will not focus on supplying the entire Kenyan, focus on the areas that we are most competitive, where we have less losses, where we have more control of our operations. So, and how KPLC decides that, I'm not going to say it's up to KPLC, but I think it's obviously up to the policymakers. I don't think you to play a game of a race to the bottom in terms of prices. Focus on being efficient, being most competitive is how I would align that thought that you're trying to get at. Because we have seen in our business, the race to the bottom does not really help. Right now, there's a race to the bottom in terms of between developers chasing the captive system where everyone is trying to give the cheapest price, where you win with everything.
Yeah, thank you for that nice presentation. My name is Dr. Patrick Karemi from Kenya Power. My question is about the green hydrogen. And I'm looking into the aspect of water desalination in the ocean. Are you looking into investing into the byproducts of the whole process? For example, oxygen, which can be used in hospitals and so forth. Thank you.
So we as Fortescue are not looking at the byproducts, for example, oxygen, but what we are hoping, like I mentioned, is that from this industries, from this green hydrogen generation, a lot of other industries associated or downstream will install. So oxygen